You're listening to the Good Food CFO podcast, where we challenge the status quo of the food industry, celebrate good food founders who are building businesses on their own terms, introduce industry disruptors, and are redefining equitability. If you're ready to build your financial confidence and join the good food revolution to change the way the food industry does business, you are in the right place. I'm the Good Food CFO and your host, Sarah Delavan. Today on the podcast, I am joined by Jenni Trillick and Marcus Contaldo, the co-founders of Modest Coffee. I learned about Modest Coffee on December 29th when a blog post they wrote was shared with me via email. The blog post was titled, "How We Got Grifted by a Multi-Billion-Dollar Distributor and Need to Move 30,000 Bags of Coffee." I read the blog post and was outraged, not because I was surprised that this had happened to them, but because I knew that they weren't the only ones that had experienced something like this. And if we didn't share their story far and wide and amplify it on places like this podcast, then it was going to continue to happen to good food founders over and over for years to come. I am so grateful that Jenni and Marcus have decided to join me here on the podcast to talk about their experience, to share some of the details of what happened and what led up to, the return of 30,000 bags of coffee from the distributor back to their warehouse, and the lessons that they learned along the way and after the fact. We cover a lot of ground in this episode, and there is so much value in it. I cannot wait for you to hear it. So let's get to it. Jenni and Marcus, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much. We're happy to be here. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're excited to be here. Thank you.
I'm super grateful. I want to say right, on the top, so grateful that you are here. My colleague, Felice Thorpe, shared the blog post that you all posted on December 29th, sharing a really common, unfortunately, and really frustrating and terrible situation that you found yourself in with the distributor. And the fact that you're willing to share your story, both in that blog post and on social media, and now here on this podcast, I think is going to help so many founders. And I'm just really honored that you're here and really appreciate your time.
Well, thank you for having us. We are so happy that you invited us to be on and to share our story today. I'm really happy that we're going to be able to let other people know about our experience and hopefully help other people with maybe some of the things that we've learned.
Yeah. I want to go back to the beginning of Modest Coffee and talk about why did you start the business and what was the early vision for, what you wanted to accomplish and do?
It's funny. We started out almost 10 years ago, and it was mostly a passion project for me. We were getting coffee from a farmer's market, and it was single origin and just like a beautiful tasting coffee. And we couldn't get any more. And through trying to get more after the farmer's market ended, trying to get more coffee, like I found on the guy's website, like how he was roasting coffee at home on a popcorn popper. And I was like, oh, I could do that. And so, we started shortly after that, where we kind of recognized that there was a hole for relatively inexpensive, like accessible, affordable, single origin coffee. Because like the great coffee roasters that I was buying coffee from at the time, to buy online, it was like $25-$30 just to get a bag of coffee. And I was like, that's just ridiculous. So,
when you factor in shipping and everything else.
yeah. So we had the idea where we were like, let's try and we'll start by selling coffee for $13, like with free shipping anywhere in the country. And then we got a really inexpensive like warehouse space, and we just kind of like no business starting a coffee business. Like we had no idea about CPG, about like, anything. We were just like, oh, we like coffee and let's try and sell it online. And there was more or less like, it was successful enough to pay for the rent. I remember like we went on Reddit and maybe got like 100 subscribers that paid for the rent. And I still had a day job, and I roasted coffee nights and weekends. And that's how we started. 10 years ago.
Yeah. So our whole plan was just to be an online coffee subscription business. And we were also trying to demystify and simplify single origin coffee buying. So we set it up that we have tiers and then we switch out our coffees within those tiers. Once somebody lands on a tier that they like, they can trust us to find coffees that they will enjoy in that tier. And so that was kind of our idea, is that we would have this subscription model where we would curate coffees for people. And then, it's really hard if you don't have a pile of cash for online advertising and all of that build out the infrastructure needed for a successful online business. It's really hard to make it. So we ended up shifting focus a little bit. We did a farmer's market. So we started in the fall of 2013. That spring, summer, we did a farmer's market, and then we met our first grocery client at that farmer's market. He was like, "Oh, I love your coffee. I'd love to sell it in my grocery store." And he took Marcus under his wing and taught him the grocery business. And he was somebody that Marcus could go back to with questions and bounce ideas off of and say, "Well, how do I do this? And how do I do that?" And so that's really how we ended up kind of pivoting into the grocery store business and wholesale more.
So you launch online with the subscription model idea, but then you sort of shift to D2C in person, or you add that channel essentially.
We added grocery. We still have an online business and it still does pretty well.
It's like 30% of our business now.
Yeah, about so it does pretty well, but I would say like our most primary focus is on the wholesale. That's kind of like become the big part of our business.
Yeah.
And I think that's pretty common for coffee roasters too. It's coffee is one of those things that people typically want to buy in the grocery store. It's hard for people to trust, I think, brands online unless they've tried them before. So even though we sell online, you'll find a lot of our customer bases in the Midwest still, because they've had our coffee either through meeting us in person at a pop-up event or at a grocery store or cafe restaurant.
Yeah.
Okay.
So if like 30% is online, like we still, the other 70%, probably like 80% of that other 70% is now grocery. Like we've just found, a really good niche. And I heard a statistic somewhere. It's like 70% of all coffee is consumed at home.
Mm,
And so I just thought that was an interesting statistic because I felt like that's also who we cater to. We've always catered to people since we started that brew coffee at home. And so
right.
it just seems like it's a natural fit to be in grocery stores
Yeah.
for us. Whereas like some other coffee roasters might focus more on restaurants or cafes or that type of business, which is still important to us too. But we've just found so much more success in grocery because I think we just connect with customers in that segment
Yeah.
more.
And when you made that move, you guys were self-distributing to the grocery stores.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We still self-distribute to most of our customers right now, even.
Yeah. And at some point in your business, when I was reading through the blog post that you shared on the 29th, you talked about, self-distribution takes a lot of energy, it takes money, it takes time. And so you guys had gone through some sort of decision making process where you thought, we need to shift to working with a distributor. And maybe that's for a portion of your grocery business, not all of it. Maybe it was just for expansion. Perhaps you can talk a little bit about that and like maybe some of the thought process that you went through to land at let's partner with a distributor.
Sure. So it would have been 2 years ago now, 2021, the beginning of 2021. We were really just trying to focus on what's our next steps. We're in most of the Chicago area independent grocery store chains, doing a lot of deliveries. It's taking a lot of our time, focusing on all of that ourselves. And so, we're kind of at this point where we're like, do we want to build out our own delivery model? Do we want to expand our direct service deliveries? Do we want to work with a distributor? Like where are we going? What's our next steps?
And the primary motivator here was expansion. Like we were in our local markets and we were like, well, we need to get to new markets outside of the Chicagoland area. So for sure, that was the main driver, is like, how do we take what we're doing here regionally and expand it out nationally was ideally the goal.
Yeah, and we had come up with a few different ideas. Like, do we want to maybe open up little satellite distribution points and hire somebody in different markets to go distribute for us? Do we want to work with a local distributor? Do we want to just hire a delivery person and have them, maybe just expand within the Midwest instead of nationwide? And ultimately, we decided that, we want to start focusing on some bigger customers and people customers that don't necessarily have central distribution for themselves that would work with a nationwide distributor. So we hired a food broker, somebody that we had worked with in the past, but we were not at the point in our business that we wanted to grow as much as he wanted us to grow at the time, which I think was a good business decision because we never wanted to take on more than we could handle.
Yeah.
We discussed our different options with him and decided on the grocery distributor that we decided on.
Okay. I want to pause for a second and just like highlight this idea of we don't want to take on more than we can handle. You had an idea in mind of how much growth you were interested in having within a certain time frame. And I want to highlight this for a couple different reasons. One is that I think in the general business media and business content, there's a lot about investment and growth at all costs. And if you're not growing, like, what's the point, And
Mhm.
we have a very different motto here. It's like, what do you want to be? What do you want your business to be? And what kind of growth feels right for you? Right. And so
Mhm.
I think just the fact that you had some thoughts around that, I think is something to I was going to say congratulate, which I think is the wrong word. Forgive me. But like something to celebrate, that
Yeah.
you have that. And I think hearing that will help other founders go, okay, you know what? If the type of growth that others think I should be having isn't what I want, like I can say so, I
Well,
can.
Yeah.
I think a part of that too is like we had some maturing that we've done over the past 10 years too, where we decided like very intentionally that like we're okay with our coffee not being for everybody.
Mhm.
Meaning like we're not trying to be all things to all people. Like we know who our people are that like coffee, and we're trying to make it more accessible, but we're also not trying to to make it fit somewhere where it doesn't. So we were kind of like okay of like knowing who our market was, knowing who we were catering to, and trying to go after a smaller segment rather than like we already made that mistake, I guess I should say, in the past where we tried to like we're like, let's sell coffee to anybody that'll buy coffee, right?
Mm.
And now it's like, okay, no, we know who our target is. It's like people that care about quality and sustainability and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but I think it is funny that you noticed that we didn't want to grow like bigger or faster than we wanted to, because ironically that's exactly how we like the situation we ended up on, like the one that I never wanted to be in.
Yeah.
And in fact, we had a different option with this food broker that we could have gone with instead of the distributor. That would have been a really great opportunity, but it would have been too much for us, or we felt like it would have been too much for
Yeah.
us. It probably would have ended up actually being about exactly what we went through. I do think it's really important that people should not try to grow more than they can handle, because it's just a recipe for being miserable.
Yeah. And my question was going to be around like, the factors, right? More than you can handle. Like how much can we produce in our facility, right? How big is our team? How much do we have to invest in growth? Because that's a really important factor in CPG. It's like it takes money, right? You have to spend a good amount of money, and it varies depending on how you're growing long before you are going to get any money back. And I know that that is also part of your story. So you find a broker, a trusted broker, and you make a decision. Sounds like you have at least two options and you make a decision. Let's talk about the process of onboarding with a
Okay,
distributor. What does that
sure.
look like?
So basically, we talked to our food broker. We said, okay, we think that this particular distributor is the way that we want to go. They're nationwide. They work with a lot of specialty grocery stores, which is where we found success. They support a lot of small independent brands like ourselves. So we thought that it sounded like they would be a good fit for us. It sounded like they're already working with us, our people. Like this should be pretty seamless. They seem to know what they're doing. And so part of that process was, meeting with the coffee buyer for the distributor and just presenting our product and seeing if they were interested in even carrying us. And so we had a meeting with him and it went really well. He was really interested as a single origin coffee, like a dedicated single origin coffee roaster. There's not a lot of us out there, and there's really no dedicated single origin coffee roasters in the grocery stores right now. So we are, adding a unique value for the distributor. And so they were totally great about wanting to bring us on. Then we had some local grocery chains that we wanted to bring over. It's like kind of like a peace offering to the distributor. Like, we offer you this. It's like a dowry.
Right.
We have business that you can help facilitate. Yeah.
We're not just some brand new company. We have something that we're bringing to the table. So there's that. There's all of the paperwork, so much paperwork. The food broker was handling most of that for us. We were not really involved in the whole process because he's gone through this before. So that was kind of his role, to get us set up and to act on our behalf. And when you're a new customer I don't know if it's all distributors, but this one and some of the other major ones, what they do is they have you on a payment hold, where your first shipment to one of their distribution centers, you're not going to get paid on it until after it sells through, which we knew going into this, but we figured we know the grocery chains that we're already working with. We know the volume that they're buying. So we had an idea of what we were going to forego during that transition period. An order would get placed with the distribution center for these grocery chains. Grocery chains would order it, then we'd be paid, we'd be off payment hold. And I think this is maybe somewhere where the food broker might have dropped the ball a little bit. It was like good 9 months from when we were onboarded into the distributor system before our existing customers even started buying, and we kept bringing up to him, we're like, hey, this is kind of not, like, why aren't they switching over? And,
we hadn't even received the order from the distributor at this point.
Yeah. So this is all part of it. So this kind of is how we ended up in the debacle that we ended up in, because by the time this order for this large retailer had come in, the one that was about the blog post, we should have already been onboarded and in their system and getting paid
and
by
off
them.
payment hold.
Payment hold. So anyways, this is all part of the process. You're on payment hold. They want to make sure you're legitimate. There's a lot of paperwork. There's bringing your own customers. There's transitioning your existing customers into buying from the distributor system, because that is now, we're going from DSD to distributor. So there's a lot of steps and a lot of moving parts before it's all functioning smoothly.
Yeah. You said 9 months pass from the
so we're
initial
onboarded. Our grocery stores didn't even start buying until after this major retailer order was in, and we were already in the thick of our whole situation. They started buying from that stock. But
so to give a little context to anyone who didn't read the blog post, the buyer from the distributor, that coffee buyer that you mentioned, comes to you and says, we have a customer who we believe wants, 6,000 units, I think it was, of your coffee for their coffee program.
Yeah.
And you're like, amazing. Is that right?
6,000 units is a lot, but you know what? Like, we can handle that. Like, that was within the realm of what we were expecting the first orders to be from these groceries. This is like what we were we were completely financially prepared for 6,000 units, which we thought was bags.
Yeah. And
which is, I think, most people would think of as bags.
So I want to highlight this too, because, excuse me. Sorry, listeners, I have a cold and I'm a little raspy and a little coffee, no pun intended. Or maybe pun intended. I have worked with clients who transitioned from selling direct to working with a distributor. They sell in cases sometimes, they sell in units sometimes, and the verbiage is not streamlined across channels and across partners. And I remember this one instance where this person said, okay, they've ordered 200 units. Is that cases or is that bottles? And I said, we need to verify what they mean. And we could see on the PO, based on the price that that was like associated with it, that they meant bottles. And so we were like, okay, let's transition this in their system to cases, because that's how we want this to be set up. So when that first order came through, we were like, hold on, let's make sure we're all talking the same language. Let's make sure the pricing is right. Because I was like, there's no promising that if you deliver and the pricing is wrong, that they're going to pay you anything other than that wrong. And because it was lower than what it should have been. So this is not uncommon. Like if someone is listening and you're like, no, it wouldn't be bags, it would be cases, distributors buying cases, is not always the case.
Yeah.
And it can be confusing. So I totally get the misunderstanding here.
Well, and the thing is our food broker knew that, but he never communicated to us, hey, are you guys ready for 36,000 bags of coffee? Like never once did he mention to us, like before we got started, this is cases. Like
or even that it was a possibility like up for debate of like, oh, we should clarify what this means. Like,
yeah.
You know,
did you all say to the broker, like, hey, is this bags? Or
we were like, we just said like 6,000. We just assumed it was bags. And we said to the broker, we were like, 6,000 bags is a lot, but we can do it.
Right.
And so, you know, like, I don't want to make excuses for the guy, but I know that we weren't his only client. And so like, I think it's easy for someone that's busy to just be like, oh, move on. Right. It's another deal for them.
They saw the 6,000 and we can do it. And they're like, cool.
Yeah.
Close the email.
Boom.
Let's
done.
go.
I'm checked out for the weekend. Right.
I mean, I guess that's kind of like I don't know. I mean, I think I don't want to say like, was our communication and what our expectation of him incorrect? Because I don't think that it was. I think that he knew that we were hiring him to teach us what we don't know. But I think Marcus makes a good point that, you know, we were relying on him more than he was maybe prepared to give us. Like we expected more hand-holding.
A little more hand-holding, right? Exactly.
I mean, it's just been okay if he would have just said the only thing I wish he would have said, like, hey, you guys have never put together a 36,000 unit bag order. Are you guys ready for it? Do you even have those amount of bags in stock? Because we've talked to him about how, you know, we get our bags made overseas because we have like very specific dimensions for them. And you know, we've talked to him about how, like, if we have a large order, we have to be able to make sure that we've gotten in the coffee, and we've talked to our importer about making sure that there's enough product available for us. So we've talked to him about some of like the sourcing that we need to do behind the scenes to fulfill big orders. So I know that he knew, but I just don't know that he was concerned.
And so this was like the first of many balls that got dropped. It was like, you know, the communication between us and the broker, right? Of like, like you said, like we should have definitely like pumped the brakes there. Okay, what does unit mean? Right? Like that's a lesson learned there. But there was also balls dropped between the distributor and their customer.
The message here is like, I don't think anybody likes to blame anybody else, right? It's like at the end of the day, there was a communication breakdown, period, right? Like we can just kind of settle on that and learn from it. And now the listeners can learn from it. But I think another lesson is like, don't be, and I'm not saying that you were embarrassed or anything or like afraid. There are no dumb questions. Every question, like if you have like a concern, if you're getting like I'm not positive about this and I have a question, right? Like ask that question, because
I agree.
There's
100%.
clarify, because miscommunications happen, right? And this industry there's a lot of secrets. There's a lot of ways that things get done that if you're going through it for the first time, even if it's not with a distributor, right, there's things that are just going to be completely new to you. So ask the question. You know, I think that's a learning moment for everybody. And that goes for like any founder, any entrepreneur, right? Like myself included, when you're embarking on something new, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, especially I feel like in the grocery industry, there's like an acronym for everything. And what is this? What is that? I don't even know what any of this stuff still means or stands for anymore, you know? I just use the acronym so much now.
We can also walk away from this feeling empowered, like as producers, as vendors, as, you know, people that have value in the market. We can absolutely ask those questions. We found now that we got rid of our broker, we can pump the brakes and we can we have agency in a way that like we didn't necessarily felt like we did at the beginning. Like we didn't want to step anybody's toes, or, this is new, we should know this, or maybe that. No, it's like, no, like you have the agency. I think that's another huge lesson learned now, is that like we feel much more comfortable pushing back. With the distributor.
It's hard being like a nice Midwesterner too. It's like, well, I don't know. Should I say something to the food broker about this? I don't know. I don't want to annoy him. I'm sure he's really busy right now. It's
So
But by the way, I'm probably paying him.
Right, exactly. Of course. Why do I think this way? But I can't. It's like, I can't help where I was raised.
I know I'm from Pennsylvania, but I get classified as a Midwesterner all the time. And I'm like, okay, I guess it's a compliment, right? I'm a nice person. So that's,
You're like you're on the edge, but I'm sure you're very nice.
You're still flyover country.
Take you on our team.
One of my clients has said a couple of times, like early on when they agreed to work with a distributor, they felt green and grateful. And so they were moving through the relationship with like in that kind of mindset, and then realized like, wait a second, this is not working for me. Cut ties with that relationship because it wasn't financially beneficial. And then was like, I won't go into these relationships like that anymore. I have agency. This is my business. I need to agree to terms that like work for me and make sense for me. So it's a huge lesson. I think the earlier founders and co-founders can understand that and like get confident in that, the better it will be, for the industry as a whole. And of course, for them. So this big order comes in, which is not 6,000 bags, but it's 36,000 bags. When do you realize this?
Well,
13 orders. So it wasn't one order.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. That was part of the kicker of it too. We actually knew at about 2 weeks that we were well over what we could handle. But it was going to 5 different distribution centers, and each distribution center gets their own PO, but then they set like multiple POs for each distribution center. So, and they didn't even come all in the same day. It was like, they were just kind of like processing them through as they were processing them through, in no discernible order. So we would get a PO, and then we get another PO, and then we get another one. And then they just keep adding up. And we were over like 20,000 bags within 2 weeks of orders. And so that's when we're starting to freak out. That's when we did a trade show that June, 2 weeks in, and Marcus was there with the food broker and was like, what is going on with these orders? This is like so much more than 6,000 bags or 6,000 units, or however Marcus phrased it to him. And then he kind of like laughed and thought it was funny that we were freaking out. And he was like,
they're right on pace.
They're right on pace. That's 6,000 cases that they meant in that email. So that's how we found out. Again,
we hired him to sell, like he's a broker. So for him, I think he just saw the number and he's like, just take it. It's this retailer. It's reliable. It's the biggest one, in the country. He's like, if anybody's going to order that much, it's them. Sell it. Just do it. Just make it. Just get it done. And so we again, kind of being naive too. We're like, okay, well, he's confident. We'll be confident, right? Like, sure, this is great.
Well, at the time, yeah. But after that trade show, when we found out that he knew it was 36,000 bags and never mentioned it to us, that trade show was, the end of the week. Then the weekend happened. That Monday, we decided we'd let him know that we're not working with him anymore. Like, it was like just
the fact that there was a disconnect at all. We're like, you knew that the number was more than we're like, that's the straw that broke the camel's back.
Yeah, because it needs to be a relationship where we're all communicating and we're all on the same page, and like I had my like things like little red flags that I'd kind of forgiven. And I'm like, well, he's a nice guy. He seems confident. He seems to know what he's doing. Like there were things that I had kind of just let go, but then like all of that added up. And then it ended at this point where we were like, if we can't trust you to just, be on the same page with us and to help us, we can't. What is this for? This isn't helping us. This has gotten us into a really rough situation.
Yeah. So can I ask, like, you're like 2 weeks in and you have these orders for more bags than you produce in a year, than you typically produce in a month? Like, what is the overage or the sort of the scale of this for
That
people
was
who
a
are
year
listening.
and a half's worth of production.
Yeah. And 6 weeks that we put together. Yeah. Yeah.
So
It
we
was
worked
insane.
21-hour days for 6 weeks straight.
Just trying to like logistically, it's like we ran out of bags. Like we knew we were getting this order for 6,000, what we thought was 6,000 units. So we had put in an order for 20,000 bags with our overseas manufacturer. So we were able to get those air freighted to us because we found we were running out of those really quickly, because that was ready like beginning of June. We had bags. I don't remember that timeline actually, but we had to get them air freighted.
Right.
And then we ended up ordering 100,000 bags because, we were like, well, then this retailer is supposed to be ordering 1,000.
36,000 bags or whatever every 6 weeks is what they said. This is supposed to be good enough for 6 weeks.
Yeah.
So we were like, well, we need
better
to start getting bags made now for 6 weeks from now.
Yeah. So just like trying to get the bags to fill was insane. Just trying to get enough coffee from our importer. We're clearing them out of, like, we have a relationship with Swiss Water Coffee. And so we like cleared them out of all of their water processed coffees that they had in stock. So it's like we have a local direct trade relationship. We cleared him out of coffee. We had to then pivot to getting a different coffee for one of our tiers. So it was like, logistically, we put pressure on our suppliers to get this order done in 6 weeks. Like nobody was prepared for this amount of coffee.
Yeah. And so, okay, they've placed an order for 36 bags that's supposed to last about 6 weeks. So now you're getting this information. So now it seems like you're preparing to, okay, we got to get this done. Then we also have to set ourselves up so that we aren't scrambling like we did this first time around for these future orders. I know in your blog post, you kind of broke down some costs. I don't know if you're comfortable doing that here as well, but what types of things did you have to invest in? And like, where did that money come from to get this initial and then these subsequent supplies in-house?
I do have it broken down in the blog, which I took from a spreadsheet where I kept a track of all of our expenses. So I don't have all the numbers on the top of my head, but it was like personal loans from friends and family, personal loans from us to the business, our own personal credit cards, our business's credit cards. We had a business loan that we had set aside just like as like an emergency, like growth fund.
Right.
So we had that set aside. And so we drew money from every last place. Also, you factor in the costs of not paying ourselves. Like through all of this, we were paying other people instead of ourselves. So like there's like a spreadsheet that keeps track of all the money we didn't pay ourselves,
Right.
which I think is still an expense as well, that I actually didn't even bother to include in the blog post because like that puts it, it's kind of like the value of your work. It's not as tangible. Yeah, it was, we basically drew every penny from every source that we could. And we kept one remaining emergency credit card, personal card that we didn't touch, which we actually ended up almost having to max out by the time we had that, because we were now in this cash flow crunch where we're trying to like just make the business operate. But now we have all of these debt expenses that we had to carry for 6 months. So it became a real frustration.
And you're on payment hold, and this is your first order. So even after you deliver the product to the distributor, they have to ship in order for you to get payment. So there's a quite a long delay.
Right.
And in the blog post, I'm just kind of reading it here. And it says we had no other choice, but we reassured ourselves that the $250,000 that this opening order would pay us and continued future orders from this retailer would be worth the investment in the end. And I think that most people in your situation would believe that. And then something happens with the distributor. You have shipped the product to them. You've delivered the product to these 5 distribution centers, but nothing's happening, right?
Yeah.
So like, take us through that.
Well, they had said like in their email, they're like, look, we can't send this to the end retailer until you've sent it to us, and you have to send it to us in full before we can send it. So that's kind of like where we're like, all right, well, the ends are going to have to justify the means of getting here. So,
and they gave us an email with a timeline. They're like, as soon as you give it to us, it'll take 2 weeks for us to send it to them, and then you'll get paid. Basically was what the email said.
Within a couple of weeks after that. So
Right.
that, like, this is what we're operating on. And so, yeah, you have your mid-July is when the last order goes out. So, it's 2 weeks in, 2 weeks after that. And we can see that the payments have been processed. Like, they process the payments before they release the payment. So you can see in the system, like, somebody has seen and approved and processed this payment, but it's on hold because we're on payment hold.
Weeks turn into months.
Yeah. And they're being very vague, and they're like, as time goes on, we're like, what's going on? And they're like, well, maybe you should try selling it to somebody else. Marcus reaches out and asks for like help to sell it.
Yeah, they were really cagey about it. And then they were like, yeah, we think that it might, while we're waiting for the answer from this big retailer, here's our list of potential customers, and you should try and find another home for it, or try to move some of it now, because it doesn't look like they're going to buy the initial, the full initial amount is what they said. And so, so I start pounding the phones and start making phone calls and trying to get us into new placements and starting to sell from this stock. And that's when Jenni mentioned earlier, like, our existing customers in our distribution center, we moved them over finally. They started ordering coffee. And then I think all in all, I ended up getting us like 30 new placements from my efforts. And I sold about 10% of that initial order before finally, I think it was October, we got the news that we knew like was there, but it was finally like in writing. They were like, hey, this is what happened. They sort of, the final shoe dropped, like the retailer made a mistake. Of course, they blame the retailer, they didn't blame themselves. And they're like, so I know we said we ordered 36,000 bags, but we actually only need 1,000 bags for 6 weeks. And so we encourage you, this is the kicker. They're like, you should either donate the excess coffee.
And we'll donate it for you. They offer
to take care of it for you.
We'll take care of the donation for you.
Right. And we'll give you a little receipt, or we can set up a vendor return and send it back to you.
But lay out for people what a vendor return is, in case somebody doesn't know what that is.
So as part of the contract that we signed up with, is we guaranteed sales of this product, of our first initial, technically
all orders,
for
really.
all orders, right? So it's like, we guarantee that product's going to sell. And so after 6 months, if it doesn't sell, then you can start getting all these fees for it not selling. As part of this like vendor return, they were like, okay, well, we're going to send it back to you, but you've got to pay us this initial setup fee and this transfer fee and this landed cost fee and this, initial order fee and all these other fees, right, that they wanted, because it didn't sell in the time frame that we guaranteed it in. They're like, it's in the contract. And then that's when we got an attorney.
Well, I want to say we got an attorney because all of those fees that they wanted us to write them a check for $37,000 before they would even allow us to take the coffee back from them.
Right.
So they've said you can either donate it or you can write a check for $37,000, and then you cover your own transportation costs as well to take it back,
to get the coffee back.
So that's when we got the lawyer involved.
Yeah. And that's when we learned that, at least in Illinois, there's Illinois protections that says like that order that they gave us, that was its own contract for purchase. And so, the intent of these fees, these setup fees and all that, the intent is like, we would have paid that had it sold through. Like, if it's not selling through, now it's 6 months removed, and you want us to pay all these fees, like, what's to prevent them from ordering $1 million and making us pay $100,000 in fees? And so in Illinois, there are some protections for suppliers like us. Basically, the attorney was like, they can't do that, right? They have to either pay you for the stuff that they bought with their PO, or they have to give it back to you without any fees. Like, these are the two outcomes that you have to ask for.
Right.
And so we were like, okay, so we want all of our product back with no fees. And then we had the attorney send the letter, and then they pretty quickly after the attorney got involved, they were like, okay, we made a mistake, we'll send it back to you.
Right.
Although like they haven't made that process easy either. Like they made it pretty easy for us to pick it up, but we're still waiting to get paid because like Marcus said, he added about 30 30 stores. And then also we had existing customers that started buying from them. So they still owe us for all of that coffee that did sell. And we've still been fighting and working out, like trying to get these fees
9 months later.
Yeah, even like a month after we've gotten the coffee back and sold it, we're still fighting with them, working on trying to get these payments made.
So
to
they agreed to send you the coffee back without paying the fees, but
Right.
you haven't gotten paid for the coffee that you did sell through,
Right.
that you delivered
Because,
to them.
because it was so complicated for them to not charge us fees. So they allowed us to take the coffee back. But like trying to like it's like been, I mean, we started, yeah, I mean, 6 weeks now that Marcus has been going back and forth, and Marcus, thank God, has worked in like the corporate sales world before coffee because he understands this corporate system.
Right.
He understands how to put together spreadsheets. He understands what all of these fees are and what they stand for because he has that work experience. If somebody didn't have that work experience, like me, if this were me trying to do this, I don't know, I wouldn't even know where to start.
Yeah, like challenging deductions. Like that's basically what I've had to do is I've had to challenge every single deduction. And we're talking about $40,000. They don't normally give those back. So, right. I mean, I have experience working with spreadsheets and I can show like, to me, it's just numbers, right? And it's like, it is what it is. Here's the thing that you agreed to do. And here's what the numbers work out. And so somebody has to do that though. It's very manual.
But somebody without that experience would be lost and just be like, I don't you guys are the professionals. I'll just do what you say to do. Right. We've had to really stick to our guns and really fight them on every single little last thing because they've been coming to us. Oh, well, there's this. Oh, well, there's this.
There's
$4,000
fee. That $5,000. It's like they don't make getting the money back easy.
Right.
They make you fight for every single penny.
So it's just a system that's really not set up to be advantageous to the suppliers and the manufacturers at all.
And part of this is like, I get it, right? Like you can earn those fees if we're selling it, right? Like but I didn't make this to get it back. And so, it's like on one hand, it's like this necessary evil, right? Like they do serve an important role distributing and moving the product. So it's like, I'm not anti-fee. You made a mistake. You said you've made a mistake.
Yeah.
You pay for your mistake.
Yeah. I think what comes up a lot with distributors is like, it's a very one-way street with them in some cases, not all distributors. I'm not going to lump every distributor together into one, I'm not going to do that. But there are situations, we have seen specific situations, including this one, where the distributor does not carry through with the commitment that the founder, the co-founder, the salesperson believes that they have agreed to, and the onus, the finances of the coordination of getting the product back, all of these things falls on the founder. And in reading your story, what really stood out to me was like, there are no consequences for them. Right. And like, there's still no consequences for them. If there were no fees involved that they were trying to charge back to you, they're just like, sorry, we ordered 36,000 bags. We only needed 1,000. Come take these 35,000 back. That in and of itself to me is bad enough,
right?
Because they're not supporting the movement of your coffee through their distribution. They're not helping you at all. They're just like, take it back and cover all the costs of getting it back. Like, that's what I think, like at the core is what like bothered me most about the story is that, or in your experience, because not just a story, but like the contracts are set up in a way where there's no consequences for the distributor. And I think that we feel optimistic as founders. We're moving forward. We are growing our business. In what world do we think that the distributor would order thousands of bags, let alone tens of thousands of bags more than what they actually need. We just aren't thinking that that is a possibility. And so
Right.
we sign these contracts that are standard, industry
Right.
standard. If you want to work with a distributor, these are the contracts that you sign.
And if you don't
But
want to sign that contract, there's 100 different producers that are right behind you that are willing to sign the contract. So it's not
yeah,
like the contracts are going to change anytime soon either.
and I think, and that's something that I hope changes, right?
Mhm.
Because I hope that the more people that hear stories like yours will say, I'm not signing that contract. And by the way, these other folks in my industry that are competitors on the shelf, but we are trying to drive the same mission, they're all going to say no too. So if
Yeah.
you want to sell our coffee, any of our coffee, insert any goods, food CPG product to the retailers that we're telling you want to buy it, you're going to have to alter your contract. Is it going to happen tomorrow? Absolutely not. Is it going to take time? Absolutely. But like that is my dream for
Mhm.
the industry, or that alternative distribution channels start to open up
Yeah.
where people are coming to the industry and saying, we're going to do this in a fair way. Here's all of our costs. If you don't sell the product, you've got to take it back. And here is exactly how this is going to happen, right? Like just transparency, I think,
Mhm.
is the key
Yeah.
thing, right? In how it can go down. And getting heated. I just it's just frustrating. And
What's
the primary reason I asked you on the show is because this story needs to be told. This experience needs to be told. Others need to be sharing it as well. And if we can help to amplify your experience, and we're doing good in the industry, I believe, because if it prevents this from happening to just one other brand, that's a win,
Mhm.
yeah,
I
right?
agree.
I agree too.
I mean, I've often thought like Marcus has his sales experience. He does sales for Modest. He did sales in his professional career. I mean, like it is like, how great would it be to have like Marcus or other people like Marcus being the food brokers, like
Yeah.
being actual advocates for brands, like going to the distributor and being like, no, this is too much coffee. You're going to have to alter it if you want to work with us. And taking some of those risks to push back. I think that people don't want to take the risks because like we tried pushing back and our food broker was like, well, if you push back against the distributor, you're going to get a black mark. And if you get a black mark, they may not want to work with you or they may want to stop the relationship. I mean, I wish I had somebody who would have fought for us, instead of kind of pushing us into something we weren't comfortable with. If more people were fighting back and pushing back, I mean, if there's 48 coffee companies, I guess, like mixed up in this whole thing, if all 48 of us had pushed back, then what would they have done? They would
Yeah.
have had to have negotiated and
Yeah.
we could have won in that situation. So
And
yeah, I think knowledge is power for sure.
this conversation, I believe, is a step in that direction. I also think too, the distribution industry is an old industry, right?
Mm-hmm.
And there weren't, maybe I'm not saying the whole truth. I don't know the facts around this, but what I'm saying is that there probably weren't lots of small brands way back in the day, right? They're just big companies like putting their product on the shelf.
Yeah.
And either there's been a movement now for several years, couple of decades, right? Where it says like, we don't want this food like products, as I like to call them, that corporations are selling to us on the grocery store. We want them to make better products that are going to make our families or children healthier and thrive in their lives. And we want them to be available to us on the grocery store shelf. So I'm going to make a product. I'm going to sell it into the grocery store, but you're being asked to play by the rules of these big corporations.
Mhm.
And you can't. It's unrealistic. You don't have the financial backing that they do, right? Like, and oh, by the way, they don't actually have to play by the same rules that you do because they're considered a less risky
Mm-hmm.
company
Right.
to work
Right.
with within the distributor than you are. And that's something that we're going to be talking about on a future podcast episode. But it's like, it's the industry is not built for you guys. right?
It's
No,
not.
For
it's not.
small
We're
brands.
fighting so hard. We talk about that all the time. We're like, if we were Kraft Foods, would, this distributor have done this to Kraft? Like, no,
Yeah.
the Kraft probably walks into the distributor and tells them how
Yeah.
it's going to be.
They're like, we're going to pay 2%, understand that this is going to get sent back to us. And we're all going to agree on that number, and then anything else that gets, spoils or whatever, you know what I'm saying? Like they have these agreements in place to make everybody's lives easier.
Yeah.
Whereas like a few $1,000s here and there for a small business like us, like I'm going to fight that. I'm
Yeah.
sorry. Like you said it was a mistake. I'm not like, here's another $2,000 fee that I have to dispute,
Yeah.
and yeah, just Kraft, approve it because it's in their budget. Right. And
Yeah.
they're like, okay, we already know. So it's not worth it. So
Yeah.
it's like you were talking about this transparency and all these fees and all this stuff. I've gone through it now and I know fine tooth comb, but I know all the fees now. And it's
Yeah.
like, you almost have to go through it to recognize it's not impossible, right? It's not like these brokers, they make it sound like it's so complicated and it's just like the hardest thing in the world to navigate. Okay, it's a handful of things that you have to look out for. It's not even as complicated as people make it sound like. But you have to have the strength and the courage to go do something you've never done before, and then learn that it's like, oh, it's actually not that bad. Like anybody can figure this out.
And you have to have the wherewithal or like the tenacity to be like, I'm not giving up on this. Yep, it's been 3 months, but I'm fighting for this $2,500 or I'm fighting for this $1,000 on principle and because it's mine. Like it should be paid to me. You have gone through this experience. The coffee has come back to you, and you needed to find a home for it because, and not for free, right? You donating is not really an option because you have spent and invested a lot of money. You've got debt associated with the production of all of this product. So you put out a call to, I think, whoever would listen, whoever was willing to read. And you asked like, hey, we need to move this coffee and we're willing to do it at a discount in order to survive, essentially. What happened after you posted that blog post and shared that on the 29th of December?
That went really crazy. So I wrote this blog post. So it had been something that we had talked about with people at various points over the course of that 6 months. Everybody had a little bit of that story, friends, family, some of our closer customers. So people, even social media, because we had posted about it on social media, like, hey, something exciting's coming. On our podcast, we had talked about it. So we were really excited about this rollout that we thought was going to happen. And then, we were going through all of this. And so I just want to put together this blog post so the entire story would be there in one place for people. Marcus and I knew this coffee was coming back. We had tried finding another home for it. Ideally, we could have just moved like 35 pallets of coffee to someplace else.
Like a secondary market, like an outlet store, right?
Yeah.
Like just like get a ticket for pennies on the dollar, right?
Yeah.
So we had some interest, but nothing concrete. And so our idea was, all right, let's just try fire selling this half price. We'll include free shipping just to get it going because, we just needed to move it. We were kind of desperate to move it.
Family, we were like, we'll just try and sell whatever we can.
Yeah.
To like existing online customers, sell whatever we can, whatever's left. Then we'll try this, one of these outlet retailers again. Marcus was like, maybe I will rent a van and I'll just go sell it to grocery stores.
Tommy Boy style,
Right.
We really didn't think that it would sell. And in fact, Marcus was in the final stages of finding a new job. He was like, if I've got to go back to work, I'm just going to be done. He's like, I'm tired of fighting this. And so he was going to work. We were going to pay off this debt and then we were just going to get out of the coffee business. We were over it. So that's kind of like what things look like when I wrote that blog post. So we like just kind of put our heart and souls into telling everybody what happened. And we figured friends, family, existing customers that, we'd sell some cases. And then it just kind of went crazy. Like had no clue that this thing would go like crazy like it did. It really kind of went viral. It went mini viral. And
no, I think it went full on viral.
I think I mean it went viral. And so it was
yeah,
really like head spinning. It was like, and especially once it hit Reddit, it was like all over once it hit Reddit. Like the coffee moderator in the coffee subreddit, like specifically said like, hey, this isn't the sort of thing we normally allow here, but this is like an exceptional situation. So we're going to let this stay up. I mean, we sold over $200,000 of coffee, almost all of it, all of the caffeinated coffee and a good portion of the decaf in 15 hours.
Yeah.
It was wild.
I was on my couch. So as I said, Felice sent me an email with the blog post and the most like clickbaity but true subject line that she put in there that I won't repeat on the podcast. And I opened it and I was just like, having just like, but it was the 29th. We had family coming in that day. And I remember like going back, and I don't know if I read it on the 29th or if I read it on the 30th, but I went back like the next day and it was gone. I couldn't get any caffeinated coffee. And I was like, well, dang, I mean, I'm happy, but like I couldn't get any coffee. And cause I was going to send it, and
thank you.
like, yeah, I want to support this, but
Nice.
It was frustrating to me. Like I was equating it in my mind to like medical benefits, right? And like medical insurance. And it's like, why do we have to turn to the people, turn to the community and go help save us, help, like it shouldn't exist. That shouldn't be anywhere in our like realm of existence, I don't think. And it's amazing that society answers the call and says, we want to support these two individuals. We want to support this company. We want to help try to keep them afloat because this is such a crappy situation that they have found themselves in. But just at the same time was like, dang, it shouldn't have to come to this.
Well, that's like upsetting too, is that, we're one of 48. And I know that there's 47 other coffee vendors that are in this shitty situation and either haven't asked for help or don't know how to.
Or trying to figure it out.
Too,
the
right?
way we did.
Haven't even gotten their coffee back yet,
Yeah.
I like to say that like, we're lucky anyways. Like we have friends and family that care about us.
Yeah.
We have our community. We're just lucky to have that alone. And then we got to experience like another level of luck, like having like this greater hug of humanity of like people, like we shipped a box of coffee to the literal North Pole in Alaska, just like so many people just, found this story and cared about us. And, it wasn't just our community, and I just like, I don't know. I think that we got so lucky to have this experience happen. And part of it is just, we've got a great support group to begin with that started the ball rolling,
Yeah.
And it's funny because Marcus had said something about like, maybe we could go viral, like maybe like something will happen. And I said to him literally, Marcus, that doesn't happen. Like we need to find a way to move 35 pallets of coffee to like somebody else because it does not work. You got to find a job. This is not going to work. And then I can't believe it actually happened.
And then I was like, see, that's all we had to do. Just go viral.
That's the internet.
Right.
So easy to go viral. Yeah.
Right.
It was pretty wild. And
I was like, I made a joke. I was like, we should have done this a long time ago.
Wish there was a way to repeat this. I mean, I'm sure there's somebody out there that knows how to make these things happen, but it's not me.
Yeah. No, I know how to go viral. I just don't. I choose not to.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think what's like really interesting about this too is like here we've been fighting this like behemoth for 6 months, and it's like we're just two people fighting against this huge machine, this distributor machine, and this just larger grocery food machine that we've been caught up in, and like nobody cared. It was just the level of how much people did not care was maybe the hardest part about this whole situation is that like, they're like, sorry, it's in the contract. Like, how many times did we hear this? And it was so frustrating. And then they just move on with their life. I'm like, you are a human being.
Right.
You live in my neighborhood because this distributor is local to us. Like you live near me. Like you might have passed my coffee on the grocery store shelves. Like, how do you not care that much? Like, why can't you go to bat a little bit? It just as a human. And then,
and no, they go to sleep like babies. They don't care.
Yeah. Well, anyways, that's maybe true, but like they're part of like this large machine that doesn't care. And then
Yeah.
it was like all of these individuals are what like kind of saved the day for us. To me, it shows the power of like one person deciding to move one case, because the majority of those cases were single case orders. So you have 4,000 people who basically changed our lives just by buying one case of coffee, when like moving a group of 30,000 bags
Yeah.
or 5,000 cases was so impossible at the time.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's like that's what is just really humbling and mind-blowing and beautiful and amazing, is how one person, one case at a time, changed our lives.
Yeah. So what is the current state and future of Modest Coffee look like after this whole experience, aside from
actually have a plan.
continuing to try to get your money from the distributor?
Yeah. We're
Right.
still fighting with them. We're hopefully going to get that resolved soon, but that's like kind of like every week. Well, hopefully it'll be next week.
Yeah. I have a 2023 sales plan.
Awesome.
Marcus turned down the job that he had applied for. So that is huge. That the coffee company is still going on
Good.
with like renewed hope for the future. That's
great.
for sure.
Yeah.
That's big.
For me personally, the shift has gone from like, I could do this till I'm 70 now. Like, I feel like I could roast coffee forever and just be like fine and content. And like,
Yeah.
we don't need to sell to, the biggest retailer in America any longer. It's like the biggest takeaway I learned from those 30 new accounts that I got is that it's like, I know all those buyers. I called them, I have a relationship. I intend to do more of that and continue the success that we've built. Before we got into our distributor, we had 130 stores. And it was all built one store at a time, building relationships and getting out there and kind of owning our business. And I am going to do that again for 2023. So continue to grow, continue to build those small relationships. And we call it like our mountain of scraps, It's like
all the little stores that nobody really cares about. Like that's who like we want to care about. That's who we want our foundation of the company to be built upon, is like if all of these individuals could buy a case of coffee to support us, I want like the same thing translated into a business model, a bunch of like small like
community stores, like
places who value what we do and like value their existence and our existence, and we value them. Like a giant chain is not going to value us as an individual. Like we want to work with more companies that really care about us, and we can care about them back.
And does that look like self-distribution again, or just different avenues for distribution?
So we've got 3 different routes. So we started working with Fair. I'm not sure if you're familiar with them.
Yeah. Started working with them. We're like, that's where our people are already shopping on Fair. So we want to really focus on growing our business there.
Yeah. Great. And then we also, because of these 30 or so accounts or 20 or 30 accounts that are in the distributor network, like we're trying to maintain that relationship, but we're
kind of stuck working with them.
Okay.
So like doing it more eyes wide open, where it's like we know everything we just talked about. We know our agency, we know what we're going to sell. Like we're going to call the shots, and it's like the distributor is going to do one thing. They're going to distribute. And it's like, we're not relying on them to build our business.
Right.
And they're going to help us, and we're going to let them help us. But that's kind of how we view that relationship now.
I think that's great. I really think that's great. I was really curious if you would maintain a relationship with them or not. And I actually think that that's a positive outcome, to be like, we learned, we understand now, and we can see how we can still benefit from this relationship on our own terms.
Right. It is a little bit hard knowing that we're going to be working with them, but I think it is important that we are going to be the ones calling the shots with the distributor. And if it doesn't work out, well, we'll figure something else out, but I'm not going to let them kind of do whatever they want to do and place as many orders as they want without a way to fulfill them. And, all of these things that we experienced.
Yeah. And then the other piece of that is now we have 4,000 new customers. And so if we can even just connect with a very small group of those, like our online business will double or triple or quadruple, and
Yeah.
it doesn't need to be all of them, but it's like we have an opportunity to connect with all of these people that are new customers. And I think that has huge potential for a business too. And
Yeah.
keep those people happy. Yeah, we've got a three-pronged approach to
Well,
continued growth.
maybe it's four though, because we still are going to keep expanding our DSD as we can until we're totally maxed out.
We are.
And then we're
I
going
didn't
to,
know about that.
yeah, well, yeah, we even through all of
Yeah, I
that,
forgot.
we're focusing right now on figuring out how to get an electric delivery vehicle and then looking at hiring somebody to do our deliveries. But doing electric deliveries is really important to us. So like right now we have an electric car, so we are able to do our own deliveries in that.
Yeah.
We'd like to get a dedicated one for the business so we can expand our DSD even more.
That's great. That's great.
Yeah.
Any closing thoughts or, final messages to folks listening who maybe have gone through a similar situation or who are embarking on distribution for the first time? Just really anything else you want to share with our listeners?
Yeah, I would say there's a couple of things that I can think of right away is if you're going to have somebody like a food broker or whatever, make sure it's somebody who's advocating for you, not somebody who is maybe just trying to like get a commission. You want somebody who's really going to advocate for you. Also, like stand up. If you feel like something is going against your instincts or doesn't feel right, like stand up and say, I don't feel right about this or whatever it is. Like we felt early on, a couple weeks into this experience, like that we weren't comfortable with it. And I really wish we would have more firmly stood up for ourselves and said, this is, we know the coffee business. Like I know this is a big retailer, but we want to pump the brakes on how much you're ordering. Because that's definitely what I would do now. I would definitely push back on that. So don't feel like just because something is bigger than you, that it's more powerful than you, even if it is more powerful in some ways, like you still have power and it's your business. Like you have to protect your livelihood above all else. So those are like the two things is to really just advocate for yourself and your business and have partners who you know are working for your best interest above all else.
I love that.
Yeah. And mine is kind of coming back to relationship, relationships matter. I will never take a blind deal again and not know like who I can call on the other end to say, hey, why is this going sideways?
Yeah.
And then also too, looking at the size of that deal and asking a critical question would have been like, what would I do if this coffee has to come back? Like, what's my backup plan? And if the answer to that is, oh shit, or I'll, have to go viral to make it, like, that's not a good business plan. Like, I'm not going to rely on going viral to save my business. Yeah, I got one. So it's like, okay, it's just having the relationship, having a game plan if something does go south, and just knowing that, a distributor or anybody that promises you that it's going to be, a means to an end is like trying to sell you something. You have to own your business and you have to get out there and sell it. And it's you. It's all is going to fall on you anyways. And so like just owning that and trying to enjoy that. I want that to be my journey for the next 40 years is just being okay and owning that part of the business and just not trying to sell out, like I don't want to sell out. I just want to be comfortable with the journey and being fine with that, rather than like I messed up my hand and I haven't worked for a couple of weeks now and I'm like I want to roast coffee. Like that to me is like I just I got into this because I was passionate about it, and I just am okay being passionate about it and not so worried about getting to an end.
Yeah. And may I ask, like, do you pay yourselves from this business? And if it grew, slowly but surely, and you were able to pay yourself and pay a team member, but not be the number one coffee company in the world or the country, you'd be okay with that?
That's fine.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's something we learned too, because we were like, oh, how do we grow? How do we get to the next level? What does it take to become a little bit bigger? Because we know people in the coffee industry, and we're friends with some people who have bigger coffee companies than us. And we're
Yeah.
like, how do we get to that level? We got to do this. This is the next step. But actually, I think through this whole thing, like all I want, like through working so hard and being so frustrated and that stress, I'm like, I kind of just want like a life that's easy. I just want to like a job where I make my own hours and I can be available when I need to be available, and that pays the bills. Like it's fine. And
Yeah.
like you're saying, like, we've got a few friends that work with us. We pay our friends. It's like, it's just great. Like, why do I need much more than this? I mean, I'd love it if we could give back to the community more with our business. In my blog post, I talked about how we'd love to be able to hire refugees or hire single moms who need flexible scheduling or whatever it is. Like, those are ways that we would love to grow. We don't need to grow like crazy time. Right.
Yeah.
It can be, we're happy with like the organic growth where we don't need to push ourselves or push outside of what feels good.
I think that is a perfect message to end on, because I wish that for everyone, really, right? Is to be the business you want to be, have the business that you want to have, and be okay with that. Right.
Yeah.
So amazing. Thank you both so much for being here, for sharing your story, for, being transparent and vulnerable and open. And I know that many others are going to benefit from this. So we appreciate it.
Thanks,
I thought
Sarah.
of one last thing.
Yeah.
Biggest lesson learned here. Make sure you have workers' comp for yourself as a founder.
Oh, yeah.
Hugely important.
Excellent point. Thank you.
Figure that out. Get it. Your broker might tell you don't need it, but you need it.
Yeah.
Make sure you're covered.
We'll, for those of you that are Good Food CFO Plus members in our community, we'll share why Marcus believes that's so important in the bonus content inside of that membership. Thank you both so much for being here.
Thanks, Sarah.
We'll link
so nice to meet you.
You as well. We will link to the Modest Coffee website and to that blog post in the show notes. And have a great day.
You too.
You too.
Jenni and Marcus will be joining us for a fireside chat open to all members of the Good Food CFO community on Tuesday, February 28th. You can learn more and join via the link in the show notes or by visiting join.thegoodfoodcfo.com. As always, I am so grateful to have spent time with you here today. If you enjoyed this episode, found it helpful or inspiring in any way, please share it with your founder friends on social and rate and review the podcast wherever you listen. It's the #1 way to help more good food founders find the show. I'll be back with a brand new episode in 2 weeks.